Hey everybody, Mrs. Norris here. So today I'm going to walk you through document A of our DBQ. How did the Constitution guard against tyranny? So before we get started, let's look at our KUDs, our know, understand, and do. So what we need to know is we need to know the information that's going to help us answer the questions. Why do we have the government that we do? How do you form a government? And how did the Constitution guard against tyranny? What I'd like you to understand is that the Constitution created a republican form of government based on the consent of the governed that was strong enough to hold the states and the people together without letting any one person, group, branch, or level of government gain too much control. So, what you should remember is that the American Revolution just ended, and now our founding fathers are tasked with the responsibility of creating a government for this new nation. But what they wanted to avoid was any kind of government that was going to give one person too much power. And that comes from the idea of tyranny. And when the colonists were breaking away from the king, they called him a tyrant. So this is what they were trying to avoid. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to use a selection of documents to support your claim of how the Constitution was able to guard against tyranny. So before we get started, let's set ourselves up. So you are watching this tutorial here at the top. And then we have our document down here at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on my sample document and it will open it up in a new screen. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag this away. And then I'm going to divide my two windows in two. So I have my document that I'm working on one side, and then I have this tutorial that you're watching here where I'm giving you instruction on the other. Okay, so I have my tutorial up here, so you should be watching the tutorial while we are working on this assignment together. Okay, so why don't you pause the video now and set your desktop up so that you are ready to start document A. All right, so let's get started. So you are set up with our tutorial on one side of your screen and our document on the other. We have our same title slide from day one where we looked at the background essay for this activity, and you watched a couple of videos, hopefully, to help you understand what a tyrant was, what tyranny is, and what democracy is. Okay, so here on slide number 2, we have this tutorial that you're watching. If you're watching this again, you should have your screen split so that you have the document in one window and this tutorial in the other. After you leave by the end of the day today, you should have this whole activity complete with the answers that I'm working with you on today, and then you can submit it. All right, so let's look at slide number 3 because that's the bulk of our work here. So on the left-hand side of the slide, we have our annotation tools. We need to use these annotation tools so that we can show where we're finding our answers, and also later when we do write our paragraph to answer the question, how did the Constitution guard against tyranny, you have your examples, your evidence is already pulled out and already highlighted so you can find it very easily. Okay, so then we also have a short little video about federalism to give you an idea of what federalism is. And then we have our document and our space to write our answers to our document analysis questions. So what I'd like you to do right now is there's two things. So let's do the first thing. On the left-hand side is the video about federalism. What I'd like you to do right now is pause this tutorial and just watch that video so that you have a better understanding of what federalism means, because that's what document A is about. So right now, I'm going to have you pause this tutorial and watch this video, and then we'll come back together and continue working on the document. Okay, so you've watched the short video and hopefully have a better understanding of what federalism is. Now let's take a look at our document. So I'm going to be modeling for you today how to analyze one of these documents. Sorry, my printer needed to let me know it was going to sleep. So I'm going to model for you how to analyze one of these documents and answer the questions. So today will be a lot of me modeling for you, and then you can follow along with me. You can listen to my thinking process, and then hopefully you can apply that to documents B, C, and D. So let's start up at the top. And if you are doing this by yourself, you have two options. You can listen to the audio here, or you can read it to yourself. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit to help me read. I might have to make this window just a tad bit bigger. Okay, so the source for document A is the Federalist Paper number 51 by James Madison, and it was written in 1788. And James Madison was one of the main authors of the Federalist Papers. These were written during the ratification process, so when they were in the process of putting together the Constitution and deciding to sign it and put it into law. These papers were written to either support or go against the Constitution. Okay. These really have been, the Federalist Papers have been thought of over time as the most powerful defense of the Constitution. So the things that supported the passing of the Constitution the most were these Federalist Papers. And altogether, there were 85 papers, individual papers. This is number 51, written by James Madison. So the paragraph in the box there is a little bit difficult, so I'm going to go ahead and read it to you and then kind of break it down. So it says, in the compound Republic of America, the power surrendered by the people is first divided between two distinct governments, and the portion allotted to each subdivided among distinct and separate departments. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will each control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. So basically what Madison is saying, and this is Madison's idea of division of power between central or national government and state governments. And this is what federalism is, okay? Specific power divisions can be seen in this chart below. We're going to talk about that in a second, but I really want to break down what Madison is saying here in this little paragraph, this little excerpt. Okay, so his main argument here is that in creating a compound republic, the framers have really fought against tyranny. This is their best defense against tyranny, since the idea of tyranny being that all of the power is given to one person or one group. By creating this idea of federalism where the government is split, no one group can have the most power. So that is his main argument. They've created a strong central government, and they also have the state governments that were left over from the colonial era, from the colonies. So they left those, they kept those in place, but they also created a national government, a central government that's also in control of the nation as a whole. Okay? So this is like the main support idea for federalism. And this is really what's going to help pass the Constitution into law. Okay. So the whole idea really is that this main power that used to be just involved in the states, and then the king is now the states and the national government. The power is split, and they are in control of each other. That last sentence, the different governments will each control each other and at the same time control itself. Okay, so that's that main idea. So if you look at the chart, we have the powers for the national government on the left-hand side over here, and the powers of the state governments on the right, and then the ones that they share are in the middle. Okay, so this really tells you or shows you how power has been distributed under Madison's idea of federalism. Okay, so the distribution of power, the separation of power between the national or the central government and the states. Okay, so just what you really need to understand is that federalism and compound, same thing, right? So look at question number 1. It says a compound is something made of 2 or more pieces. So separating 2 things that are separated and come together, okay? What are the 2 pieces that make up Madison's compound government? I want you to think about that for a moment. What are the 2 things that make up his compound government? So obviously we can tell that the 2 pieces here are the national or the central government and the states. So it says it right up here in the top. Let me find the correct. It says it right here. It's divided between 2 distinct governments, okay? 2 distinct and separate departments, okay? So we have our central government and our state government. It says it right here. His idea of division of power between central and state governments. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use let me go back to fit. Okay, and I need to use my highlighting square. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this because this is the main point right here. That power is divided between the central and state governments. Okay, so here I have my answer for number 1 highlighted with my annotation square, and then I'm going to click and drag the number 1 right next to it. Okay, and then I'm going to type my answer on the right hand side where it says erase this text here. I'm going to remember Madison's idea of division of power between central and state governments. And then I also know that, just to be clear, central means the national government. So what are the 2 pieces that make up Madison's compound government? My answer, which you can write as well, Madison's compound government is made up of a central, and in parentheses, or national government, and state governments. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and give you a second to write that down. If you need to pause the tutorial and copy that answer, please do so. All right, number 2. So number 2, what word ending in ism, pretty big clue there, is another word for this kind of compound government. So it says it right here, right next to where we found number 1. The idea of division of power between central and state governments is known as federalism. So I'm going to take my little square and I'm going to put it around federalism. And then I'm going to move my number 2 to next to it, just like that. Okay. And then what word ending in ism is another word for this kind of compound government? Federalism. That's all I have to write. All right, let's move on to number 3. Number 3, how does this compound government provide double security to the people? So we have to think about the fact that the government is supposed to be made for the people, by the people. It's supposed to protect the people. So the fact that these 2 kinds of government, not only, as it says, are they split and do they control themselves, but they also control each other. Okay, so we have this idea that the central and the state governments are going to check each other's power, if you remember that from before. Also, each of these governments have their own branches within them, and they're going to also put each other in check. Okay, so that's where we have our controlled by itself. So my answer is going to come from this last part here. So how does it provide this double security? Well, the power is split, so it's separate, right? And they also are checking each other, making sure each other is following the law as it's supposed to in the Constitution. And they're also controlling themselves by being split up even within themselves. Okay, so that answer comes from our last part of the excerpt here. The different governments will each control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and use one of my squares. And then it says the different governments will each control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and put the number 3 next to this here. And then I'm going to write out my answer. Okay. Let's see, how do I want to answer this? The central or national and state governments will check each other's power. Also, the branches within each level of government will provide checks within that level. And that comes from sentence numbers, the last sentence of our excerpt. Again, the different governments will each control each other. So they'll put each other in check at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. So they'll also put themselves in check by branching their government into different sections as well. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and give you time, if you need it, to pause this tutorial and copy my answer. All right, so let's move on to number 4. Number 4, using the chart above, can you see a pattern in the types of power the Constitution reserved for the state government? So let's look at those. So if I look at the Venn diagram on the right-hand side, it says that the states set up local governments, they hold elections, they establish schools, they pass marriage and divorce laws, and they regulate in-state business. So I look at that and I think, okay, so it looks like the states have the power over the local issues that impact the citizens of their state, right? So that's a very personal thing, establishing a school. It's a very personal thing, marriage and divorce, okay? It's a very local thing, local governments. So the states have this power over the local and personal issues. And then these personal issues were important to the framers to make sure that they kept that power in check, right? The closer the government came to the people, the more in tune they were supposed to be with the people of their area, right? So although they want to make sure that the national government protects the citizens, so we still have things over here to protect the citizens, like make immigration laws, provide an army and a navy, but it's more broad. It's to cover everybody. But the state's powers are to protect the people of that state. Okay, so when I look at this, what words can I highlight or what can I show as my evidence? I'm going to go ahead and take my little box here and I'm going to put it over the words local, now it's, instead of having to resize another box, I'm just going to click and copy and paste that box because I also want to talk about marriage and divorce, very personal to the people living within that area. Also, too, I'm going to paste another one, in state, right? So the way I'm going to answer this, and I need to put my number over here. Click and drag. Perfect. Now, the way I'm going to answer this is I'm going to think about the fact again that they had some power. The national government has some power over the people, but it's more to protect everybody in the United States. The states have more of a personal local control, so that they can protect the people within their state itself. Okay, so I'm going to use that for my answer. So states have power over more local and personal issues, right? Like school and marriage, etc. These issues were important enough to the framers of the Constitution that they didn't want the national government to have too much local power. As governments get closer to the people, so it goes from national down to state, down to city, right? They are more connected to the feelings and cultures of their area. And then in parentheses, I'm going to put their citizens. Okay, so why don't you pause this tutorial and copy that answer. Also, make sure you have your work annotated. So go ahead and copy number 4. All right, let's move on to number 5. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to number 5, our last question for today. It says, how does federalism guard against tyranny? Well, this whole idea of separating the power between the national government and the state government means that neither one can have too much control, which is exactly what a tyranny is when one group has too much control. So nobody has absolute power over either the nation as a whole or the individual people because everything is separated. So where are we going to find that? I think that's going to be more in our own thoughts, based on everything we've read in document A. So I'm going to go ahead and go to number 5. So I don't really have anything to annotate. It's kind of a summary of everything that I've learned here in this area. Okay. So under federalism, powers are distributed between the central, and then again, just so I make sure, national government and the states. So neither group could ever gain absolute power or become a tyrant over the nation or its people. So looking at our answer again, under federalism, so I've put the idea of federalism into a sentence. Powers are distributed between the central and the national government. So central and national government, again, just sort of summarizing all of my answers together. Okay. Neither group can ever gain absolute power because they're constantly checking each other and themselves. And, so they'll never have that absolute power over the nation or the people. So kind of putting all of these ideas together is what brought us to number 5. Okay. So at this point, you can go ahead and pause this video and finish typing the rest of your answers. Make sure that you have your work annotated, at least 1, 2, 3, and 4, as we've done together, and then answers to all of your questions. Don't worry about the fact that the box is, the text is going outside the box. If that really bothers you, you can just make the box bigger and it should help. But once you have typed all of your answers and annotated your text, you can go ahead and turn in your